Well, good afternoon, everybody. How are you guys today? So I just flew in this morning. No, I didn't. I would be asleep, but I have come in. I'm super excited to be here in Sydney with you today. It is one of my favorite places to come and visit, regardless of where I am in the world. I always try to come through Sydney or Australia. The first time I was here was the week the Opera House opened. I know I don't look that old, however, I am. So I'm, really pleased to be here and for Macquarie to invite me to be here. So I'm going to spend a little time with you talking about customer experience being this new battleground and how brands are really leaning into what does that mean? What does customer experience mean, and how do we get a handle on how do we potentially pivot ourselves from being very product-led, what are the products and services that we offer or sell, to becoming very customer-led, thinking about from the outside in, what are the things we need to do to make sure that our customers are wowed by us in every interaction that we have, so that they not only are happy with what they've just purchased, but they're more likely to purchase more from us. They're also more likely to refer us to those around them that look and feel like them. So when you start thinking about why customer experience is becoming so important, this is a fantastic quote from Ginny Rometty, the current CEO and chairman of IBM, although she's in transition at the moment. But this was part of a much longer quote that she gave. And when she gave this quote, interestingly enough, it had been 20 or 21 quarters of no growth for IBM. One of the longest standing tech companies in the world. If you remember the old adage, nobody got fired for buying IBM. They lead in R&D, they lead in patents every year, but they were not growing. And a lot of it had to do with having to make the very tough decisions about how do we make sure we remain relevant to our customers, not only today, but tomorrow and where we think they're going to be going, potentially even before they know where they want to be. So I need to set the scene. I need to set the scene to let you understand sort of where we're starting from. What is the context of the market today that we're all dealing with? The first is work is changing. How we work, where we work, who we work with, how we conduct that work. Will it become more remote over the next couple of months, dealing with what we're dealing with at the moment? Will teams reimagine themselves? Will companies start to create partnerships and distribution channels and selling channels that are very different? But we know if we've been in this for the last couple of years, you may have noticed this is the first time we've had 5 generations working at the exact same time. And it may even be 5.5 at this point. As sort of teenagers start working, you're getting into almost the 6th generation working, which means you have all kinds of implications to how you lead, how you recruit, how you manage, how you train, how you measure, how you reward. What kinds of expectations do they have? Within that, you then say, well, why is it we need new ways to work? It's because competition is increasing. You have competition coming from all angles, from completely different industries. You have a company that started selling books, which you're going to hear from in a little bit, that now is stretching into all aspects of various verticals. Those competition changes mean we have to make sure that we are very responsive. Now, competition is really being driven by the fact that customers are more empowered, and they're also saying, I expect different things from the brands that I do business with on a daily basis. So if work is changing, competition is increasing, and customers are more empowered to not only make a decision very quickly, potentially with very limited information, potentially just from their mobile phone in a matter of minutes, and then they can equally leave you just as quickly. That empowerment is happening at this pace we've just not seen before because of the power that we have in our hands now in mobile phones, as well as in the power of social, as well as in the power of big data, as well as in the power of just the internet at large. Those 3 things are really being driven by the fact that our expectations of the experiences we have from brands is absolutely being raised around us on a daily basis. Each experience we have as a consumer, as an owner of a home, as someone who is trying to cook or change the temperature in your house, or start your car, or find a coffee shop, or transfer money from one place to another, or get an Uber ride, all that is happening at this pace we've just not seen. And it's really because now we're saying it not only has to be fast, but it has to be personal. It has to be contextual. I want to engage with you the way I want to engage with you. Remember the comment I made a few minutes ago about this multi-generation in the workforce? This new generation knows voice. I want to voice interact with brands. I don't want to type. So how do you then contextualize those engagements with the various kinds of customers you have? And then the third one being very, very predictive, anticipating what I may want next, even before I may want it. People who bought this also bought that. It isn't just about being predictive about the things we've been able to do over the last decade or so. This is about actually really thinking and mining and combing through massive amounts of data in order to say, what is it that we can realize from the patterns of our existing customers to understand what is it that they may want next, even before they may. So how can businesses actually respond to these new realities? How do you respond to the fact that work is changing, competition's getting harder, that customers more empowered, and that they want these personal, contextual, and real-time engagements? It all comes down to three key areas. The first being speed. Now, I don't need you to be fast just for the sake of being fast. I don't need you to anticipate that your customers may want something from you 10 years from now. I mean, who would have imagined, I don't know if Steve Jobs would have actually imagined that when they were thinking about the iPhone, that someday in the near future, there would be more smartphones on the planet than toothbrushes. Just let that sit in for a second. Some of it is because we have multiple smartphones and maybe one toothbrush, but a lot of it is because that is the connection point to almost everything that we do. So I just need you to get a little bit ahead of where your customers might want to be and greet them when they get there. Make sure that you're not letting them wait for what they expect in that anticipation of, I'm more empowered, my expectations are higher. These customer expectations are at an all-time high. There is very few industries, if any, where this expectation isn't continuing to increase and increase and increase. We've recently done some research where it actually shows that when customers are looking at brands in the business-to-business space or the business-to-consumer space, that comparing the experience that they have with a brand or a company and the product and service that they are buying, it's always been that the product and service would outweigh anything else. Sometimes you might argue that price plays a role, and it depends what industry, and that is true. But now we're actually seeing and anticipating that customer experience right now is falling around 88% of what they think that they want and they're going to make decisions based on. We think that will even out to 100% even experience and product service being sold by 2023. That means that the experiences that you're delivering are as important or equally as important as the products and services that you sell. The only way you can respond to that kind of demand, personalization, real-time, contextual, mobile, is you have to think about technology differently. Now, obviously, it's not lost on me. I work for a very large technology company, but I've also worked for startups running sales, marketing, and customer service organizations. I was an analyst at Gartner, research fellow actually, for a decade, studying and watching the way companies were high-performing from a growth perspective, using some of these new models to reach and service customers. And the underlying commonality, regardless of where I was in the world, what industry, or what size organization, startup to a Fortune 10 company, technology plays a much more critical role day in and day out. And those that actually make those investments are seeing great returns. Now, what customers are saying is that Digital business is important, but I want you to use the technology in a way that makes me feel like you know who I am, you're anticipating my needs, and also, regardless of what industry you're in, I am pulling my last best experience from a brand in a completely different industry so that I can measure you against that. And when that happens, what you're saying to your customer is, if you are using technology, and I know you have access to it, I feel like you're investing in me, that you care enough about me as a customer to do the hard lifting of integrating technology into your go-to-market strategy and your service strategy and your product portfolio. When you don't do that, when you don't make those investments, when you aren't personalized, I use this example often where I say, it pains me every time I get a mailer from a company trying to solicit me to sign up for a credit card I already have. It's like, really? Imagine how much money is being wasted in that mailer. Couldn't they just spend it on knowing that I'm already a customer? And so technology has to power the fact that, what does that tell me? You don't care about me enough to know that I'm already a customer. And oh, by the way, I've been a customer for like 15 years, and I've probably paid you enough interest to pay for that technology solution. When you don't do it, what you tell them is you have apathy towards them. You just don't care enough. The third thing on that pillar is the customer, which in many ways, I've been saying this for almost a decade now, is far more disruptive than any technology we've ever seen. Because our expectation is what is actually pushing brands to do things that may be highly uncomfortable, go against the way they've always done things. This is the way let me back that up. How many of you have sat in a meeting and heard somebody say, that's not the way we do it here? Nobody? Anybody? Okay. We tried that, it failed. Our people won't want us doing that. And then all of a sudden, it's kind of groupthink. People don't actually have to be in the room anymore because you know what they'd say. And that means that you've lost touch with what the customer actually wants from you. And in many, many industries, this is a true statement. Customers will remember the experience they've had much longer than the price they've paid. So I often use this example. How many of you have caught an Uber in the last 30 days? Wow. Okay. So leave your hands up for 1 second. How many of you have caught an Uber in the last 30 days? How many of you remember the price you paid for that Uber ride? Okay, so I want you to all look around. How many of you caught an Uber? How many of you remember the price? Ta-da! But do you remember if the car was smelly? If the music was loud? If the driver talked too much? If you had to correct the way the driver went? You remember that. So how many of you caught an Uber? How many of you remember that? Hands will stay up. How many of you remember what you paid? Hands go down. So while we tend to say we will remember the price we paid, we do when it's painful. When you don't feel like you got enough value out of what you spent. But when you feel like you got enough value, then you are willing potentially to even spend more money on that. So once again, I'll go back to Uber. Sometimes I will pay surge pricing. 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, while taxis drive by. I've stood on the street corner in Buffalo, New York. If any of you have been there in January, it's like 2 degrees Fahrenheit, which it's really cold Celsius, and whatever that translation is. And I will be standing there staring at my cell phone while taxis drive by waiting for my Uber. Like, that is really a little bit odd. But it's because the experience I have with it is I don't have to turn in receipts. It's connected directly to my expense report. It shows the map of where I was and where I was going, versus I lost the receipt. I used cash. I don't remember. And since some of you are accountants in the audience, and many of you work for businesses, how many of you have had to actually split an expense across 2 different business units or cost centers? And how many of you say that takes like 3 seconds? Never. It's almost so much work, you're like, never mind, I'll just pay for it. But in the back of an Uber, how long does it take to split a ride between two people from two different business units, two different cost centers, both going to the same meeting? How much time? About 2 seconds. So that experience is why I'm willing to pay the premium. So when you're thinking about, should we raise prices? It's, well, does the experience warrant it? Is the value great enough that our customers will feel that if you're investing in new technologies, right, it's contextual, it's personalized, it's real time, you're giving me all this value, I feel like it continues to improve and continues to improve, and we're being taught that by these consumer products like Uber or like a Netflix, who just raised their price again. And what has happened, ironically, when they raise their prices, more customers sign up for free, and then more customers actually upgrade from free to paying, and the churn rate goes down slightly. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're taking that extra revenue and that profit and reinvesting it in original content, which does what? Attracts new customers. So it's this wonderful flywheel of great experience, great value, delivers what I was just talking about a minute ago on that balance between how much experience will wait in the decision of a customer when they're looking at a brand. 88% now, we think by 2023 it's actually going to go to 100% even. So you might have the best product in the market and a fair to poor experience, you will not win. You can have a fair product, good enough, an amazing experience, and you'll win. How many of you go to restaurants where the food is good? It's good enough. But the price is right, the experience is fantastic. If the maitre d' or the waiter or the waitress remembers your name, what do you want to do? You want to go back. And even if it's a little more expensive, a little more out of the way, you will still do it. Now, certain industries are doing better than others. Generationally, you can see, I highlighted financial services, but across the board, it is not the same even. Remember what I said, we've got 5 generations working. This is not a blanket statement that every generation cares about experience more than they care about the price. It isn't that, certain generations don't know the price. It depends. Sometimes when I'm at like an accountant's conference saying that, and I say, how many of you have caught an Uber? And how many of you remember the price? And everyone's hand stays up. So I apologize to all the accountants in the audience. However, right, ultimately, it all depends. There's a big asterisk behind a lot of this. But the bottom line is that, yes, it's different by industry. Yes, it's different by generation. But directionally, it's all pointing to the same place. So, customer experience has become this highly competitive battleground. And those brands that pivot there are seeing exponentially more growth than the rest. So this image here on the right is from a book that I wrote called Growth IQ, which some of you may have noticed is actually in all of your bags. And what I did was I went out and said, why and how are some of the most high-performing businesses growing? And I came up with 10 paths to growth. Now, some of that was accidental that it became 10, but I knew it wasn't like 173, so I had to come down from there. And also, I did not want to reinvent growth models. What I wanted to do was modernize the growth models that have been in the market for decades, and in some cases, 100 years or more. And I modernized it using social, mobile, cloud, big data, AI, virtual reality, augmented reality, all the things we're now experiencing. And that's how I came up with the 10. Now, customer experience is the very first path. It's the very first path in the book on purpose. Because every decision that you make should start with the customer. Now, if you become customer-centric, know this. Your customers will only be as happy as your employees. So you have to be employee first and customer-centric. So start with the customer, work your way back in, but if your employees are not happy, if there's too many tools, remember work is changing, collaboration is changing, there's no shortage of things that they have to use on their smartphone. Everybody does things differently, but the complexity around processes and people is really holding companies back. So some of these stats up here, all of them are in the first page of the book as well on that customer experience chapter. It really shows you that those that are doubling down are seeing faster growth, that they're able to raise prices, command more from the market, differentiate their brands regardless of what industry it is, but really looking from a perspective of, hold on a second, remember, that's not the way we do it here, we tried it, it didn't work, this is what we think we should do, all of a sudden groupthink is happening in the marketplace, or in our meetings, and in our office, and you never have a conversation about the customer. So do you guys have Undercover Boss here in Australia on the TV show Undercover Boss? So the US television show Undercover Boss, which obviously started in the UK, but the US version starts, the first couple of minutes of the show is the leader or the CEO putting on makeup, putting on a disguise, changing their hair. If it's a man, sometimes we'll shave facial hair or add facial hair. The women will change their hair color and try to be, put on a nose ring, something funky to throw everybody off. And they spend 4 or 5 minutes disguising this leader. And I'm always like, that's such a waste of really expensive TV time. Because you could probably walk around your company and no one would recognize you anyway. Because you never leave your office. So part of it is walking amongst the people, management by wandering around. Get out of your office and talk to your employees. Remember, your customers will only be as happy as your employees. Secondarily, get out of your office and go see your customers. The decisions you make should be driven by those conversations you have with customers, understanding what is it they're trying to accomplish, how your business, how what you do every day is helping their success. Their success. Because if they're successful, guess what happens? You're successful. So that's how customer experience really stays at the forefront of making sure that every decision you make should start with the employee and the customer. Make the employee's life easier so they can serve the customer better. When you do that, everybody owns the customer experience. I can't tell you how many executive meetings I've sat through where literally it's a fight between executives on who owns it. I'm like, everybody owns it, from the receptionist to the customer service agent to the legal team to the CFO, to the head of sales, to the head of customer service and marketing. At the end of the day, you always think, well, it's owned by sales, or it's owned by marketing, or marketing says it's owned by us. It's owned by everybody. Because if you force a customer to fill out 5 pages of a form, like this happened to me, where I literally, somebody, it was only maybe like a year ago, sends me an email with a PDF, please do me a favor, download this, Tiffany, print it, sign it, and fax it back. I was like, it's 2019, like what have I missed? For one, I don't know how I could fax it back. Like, how do I even do that? Second, it was like, well, can't I just sign it on my computer? And so that goes back to that conversation I was saying earlier, the comment I made earlier about innovating. And what that said to me is, you don't care enough about me that you'd rather make me spend a half an hour of my time versus it would have taken me 2 minutes had I just been able to sign on my computer. So whoever made that decision on, that's okay, legal says we have to get the signature and it has to get faxed back, they don't realize the implication that has to the customer. So where do you begin? This is the opening quote of the book. This is a study by Bain, and it really highlights everything I've just said. That a lot of the challenges businesses have when it comes to growth, outside of black swan events, which ironically we're in the middle of one right now, where something happens you could have never foreseen. Oh, Salesforce actually, we had our world tour here at ICC Tuesday and Wednesday next week. We canceled it. We're going to reimagine it and do it virtually. That's 7,000 people that were going to come and see us that are no longer coming to see us. So that is a black swan event. Outside of that, it's the things we can control that we have the ability to spin up. How do we start to grow? The first one is you have disconnected teams. Teams are not organized to think about the customer first. Sales, service, and marketing is the obvious one, but then you also have to think about legal, human resources, onboarding, training. Everybody has to be connected, moving towards this single source of reality, which is, what does the customer think of our brand, think of our company, think of our products and services, and think of our people. Teams are mostly disconnected because the metrics are disconnected. How you measure and how you manage forces people to maybe not do what's best for the customer, but do what's best for the metric. And so I always use customer service call centers. When you call in, it's great if they answer the phone on the first ring. But if they answer the phone on the first ring and transfer you like 25 times, would you rather they don't answer it on the first ring and don't transfer you? I would rather they don't answer on the first ring, and maybe I sit on hold for 3 or 4 minutes, but I don't get transferred 25 times. But the metric is answer it on the first ring. Or don't ever have the customer on the phone longer than 5 minutes. It's like, well, what happens if the customer needs help and needs more than 5 minutes? So those metrics will drive behavior with your people. The third one is the implication of those two things, the unintended consequence of those two things is that your customer has a very disconnected experience. I thought I was going to get this, I got that. Because I got that, I called in to try to figure it out. And who I called into had no idea what I bought. So there are places in the world where cell phone companies will market the fact that if you see a television commercial and it says, call us now or sign up, you get 5 free phones and 9 trillion gigs of data, and we'll come to your house and rub your feet and cook your dinner, and we'll pay your bill for a year, and you're like, oh my God, I want that. So you pick up the phone or you go online and you try to get it. And they go, oh no, this is only for new customers. You don't count, because you're already a customer. And you go, wow, been a customer for a decade. Thanks for taking care of me. All you're interested in is the new customer. That's the disconnected experience. It was unintentional. Someone made the decision that that promotion was only for net new customers, completely ignoring the ones you already have. So that's what I mean by this disconnected experience. So what do those in ANZ say? Here are the stats specifically for region. What do they care about? 68% of customers expect companies to use new technologies to create better experiences. 66% of customers expect connected experiences. I'm going to make these decisions. Remember I said generationally it's different. By industry it's different. This research report, I'll tell you how you can get your hands on it. Ultimately, it really digs into the fact that this is not isolated to just consumer products. This is not isolated to things like buying a book online. This is not isolated to anything. We now are threading this expectation through everything we do as human beings when we choose to buy from a company, a product, or service. So in the future, resetting this value transfer between yourself and your customers will become more and more important. So for me, growth is a thinking game, full stop. How do you outthink your competition? It's not outdevelop, it's not copy, it's outthink. You have to reimagine what's possible using technology. You have to reimagine who your customers are and what kinds of people you need working for your organization. You need to think about how do you align yourself and enable your employees to serve your customers better. Don't chase the competition because they might be doing things wrong. Look out of industry, look for people who are doing it really well, and say, could we recreate that same kind of experience in our own company? If I asked you all to tell me, give me one name of one brand of somebody who has wowed you in the last 30 days, I'd be interested to know if any of you actually said someone's brand that was sitting in this room. Would someone say your brand? You have to think about that is what this is all about. Everyone plays a role in customer experience. You will win on your mental model, how you do things, not what you sell, but how you do it. And at the end of the day, it all starts with you. It starts with you individually to bring back, to collectively motivate everyone around you to deliver those things every single day and serve your customers. So my final question for you is, what will you do differently? What will you do differently based on what you've heard here today? You've spent a whole day here learning, listening, breakouts, purpose-led, customer experience, growth. What will you do differently? Because if you go back to work tomorrow morning and you do everything exactly the same and you don't pivot ever so slightly, you've wasted a day. We can all make more money, we cannot make more time. So I hope you've enjoyed the time with me. I've enjoyed the time with you. If you want to follow up on some of that information, you can get that research report at salesforce.com/research. It's totally free. It's called Connected Customer. That's my podcast, and that's also a copy of the book that you already have. But thank you so much for your time and attention. I've enjoyed my time with you. Thank you.